Basically, it was an iron frame which fitted onto the unpopular woman's head and was padlocked on the back, so only the key holder could get it off.
History often paints a grand picture of progress, battles won, and empires built. But beneath that surface lies a darker, often deliberately ignored reality, the targeted cruelty inflicted upon certain groups. Throughout the ages, women have faced specific, brutal forms of punishment designed not just to cause pain, but to humiliate, silence, and enforce rigid societal control. Forget heroic tales for a moment. Today, we delve into the chilling record of 10 truly brutal tortures specifically used against women. Practices born from fear, misogyny, and the desire to dominate. This isn't about shock value alone, it's about understanding the grim tools used to police womanhood itself. 1. The Scorns Bridal. Our first stop is 16th and 17th century Europe, particularly Britain. Imagine a heavy iron cage crudely fashioned to fit over the entire head. This was the Scorns Bridal, sometimes called a Brank's Bridal. But its horror lay in a specific detail. Protruding inside was a metal plate or gag, often studded with a sharp spike, designed to be forced into the mouth and pressed down hard upon the tongue. Who endured this? Women accused of being scolds, those deemed too argumentative, too outspoken, or simply prone to gossiping. Any attempt to speak, even a whimper, would cause the spike to dig deeper, tearing flesh, causing intense pain and bleeding. The sheer weight and discomfort were constant torment, but the punishment didn't end there. The woman locked in this dehumanizing mask was often paraded through the town, sometimes led by a chain. It was a public spectacle of humiliation designed to make her an object of ridicule and scorn, reinforcing the message that a woman's voice, if deemed disruptive, would be brutally silenced. It wasn't just about preventing speech, it was about stripping away dignity in the most visible way possible. Now, while silencing a woman was a cruel form of control, other methods aimed not just at the voice, but at the very symbols of femininity and motherhood, inflicting unimaginable physical destruction. 2. The Breast Ripper. This next device leaves little to the imagination with its name, the Breast Ripper or Iron Spider. Used predominantly during the nightmarish era of European witch hunts and the Inquisitions, this torture tool was terrifyingly direct. Fashioned from iron, it resembled a large, multi-pronged claw, sometimes heated red-hot, sometimes used cold for a slower, tearing agony. The claws were clamped onto a woman's breast. Then, with brute force, it was used to pull, tear, and shred the flesh away. The pain inflicted is almost incomprehensible. This barbaric act was reserved for women accused of specific transgressions, often tied to societal fears surrounding female sexuality and agency, witchcraft, adultery, heresy, or even self-induced abortion. The mutilation was profound, often leading to massive blood loss, shock, and, if the victim somehow survived the initial assault, lethal infections in the gaping wounds. It was a punishment that attacked a woman's body at a core part of her identity, a savage assertion of power over female life and reproduction. Public humiliation and physical mutilation were terrifying tools, but sometimes the torment involved the primal fear of drowning drawn out in a horrifying public display. 3. The Ducking Stool. Picture a sturdy wooden chair fixed to the end of a long pole, like a seesaw balanced on the edge of a river or pond. This was the ducking stool, particularly common in England from around the 17th century onwards, though variations existed earlier. Its targets, once again, women who didn't conform, those deemed quarrelsome, nagging, disorderly, or inevitably suspected of witchcraft. The accused woman was securely tied into the chair, often struggling against her bonds. Then the pole was pivoted, plunging her backwards into the cold, murky water. She'd be held under, gasping, choking, before being hauled up, only to be plunged down again, repeatedly. The ordeal wasn't necessarily designed to kill instantly, though drowning was a constant risk. Hypothermia, exhaustion, and sheer terror took their toll. And all the while, a crowd would gather to watch, jeering, shouting insults, sometimes throwing mud or stones. It combined physical torment with ritualized public shaming, turning punishment into a disturbing form of community entertainment, reinforcing social norms through fear and degradation. If being repeatedly drowned wasn't horrific enough, Imagine a torture designed to inflict agony through agonizing pressure and a slow, grinding violation of the body's most sensitive areas. 4. The Spanish donkey. The Spanish donkey, also known as the wooden horse or chevalet, was a brutally simple yet devastatingly effective medieval torture device. It consisted of a main wooden beam, often triangular, with the top edge sharpened to a V-shape mounted on legs. The victim, frequently a woman accused of crimes society linked strongly to female deviancy like witchcraft or perceived sexual transgressions, was forced to straddle this sharp edge naked, her entire body weight pressed down onto the narrow cutting apex. To intensify the agony and ensure maximum damage, heavy weights were progressively added to her ankles. Hours could pass like this. The sharp edge would slowly, agonizingly slice into the flesh of the groin and perineum, potentially reaching the bone. The pain was relentless, the damage horrific, often causing permanent injury, severe bleeding, and sometimes over days, leading to infection and a slow, agonizing death from internal trauma. It was torture designed for prolonged suffering, targeting an area intrinsically linked to female anatomy with focused cruelty. Internal agony was the goal of another terrifyingly inventive device, one designed to inflict maximum damage from the inside out. 5. The Pair of Anguish. Known variably as the Pair of Anguish, choke pair, or paratormenum, this metal device holds a special place in the annals of insidious torture, particularly during the Middle Ages and the Spanish Inquisition. Shaped like a pear, it was composed of several metal segments or leaves connected to a central screw mechanism. This compact device was forcibly inserted into one of the victim's orifices: the mouth for alleged heretics or blasphemers, the vagina for women accused of adultery, witchcraft, or inducing abortions, or the anus for accused homosexuals, though women certainly suffered this too. Once inserted, the torturer would turn the screw. This caused the segments to slowly, inexorably expand outwards, stretching and tearing the internal tissues. The pain would build to an excruciating crescendo, causing massive internal bleeding, lacerations, and often irreparable damage. Depending on the orifice and the degree of expansion, it could break the jaw, rupture internal organs, or cause fatal hemorrhaging. It was a uniquely invasive and violating form of torture designed to cause maximum suffering in the most private parts of the body. Many of these horrifying devices reached peak usage during a specific period of mass hysteria and paranoia. To truly grasp the context of such cruelty, we need to understand the era that birthed much of it. 6. The witch craze. The European witch hunts, raging roughly from the 15th to the 18th century, represent one of history's darkest chapters of mass paranoia and gendered violence. While men were occasionally accused, the overwhelming majority of victims, estimated between 75 to 85%, were women. Why? It was a perfect storm of factors: religious upheaval, societal anxieties about unexplained misfortunes like crop failures or disease, existing folk beliefs about magic, and deep-seated misogyny all played a part. Women, particularly those who were old, poor, widowed, healers, midwives, or simply didn't fit neat societal boxes, became easy scapegoats. They were seen as morally weaker, more susceptible to the devil's temptations, and inherently linked to carnal desires and secretive, potentially dangerous knowledge, like herbalism. Influential texts like the notorious Malleus Maleficarum, Hammer of Witches, published in 1487, provided a theological and pseudo-legal framework for identifying, prosecuting, and crucially, torturing suspected witches. It explicitly detailed women's supposed propensity for evil. This widespread fear created an environment where the horrific tortures we've discussed, like the breast ripper and others yet to come, weren't just tolerated, they were seen by many as necessary tools to extract confessions and purify society from a perceived demonic threat, unleashing unimaginable cruelty primarily upon women. Within this terrifying climate of the witch hunts, specific tools were designed not just for quick pain, but for prolonged agony meant to break the victim's will entirely. 7. The witch's chair. Another invention seemingly tailor-made for the witch trials was the appropriately named witch's chair or Judas chair. Imagine an armchair often made of iron, but with every surface, the seat, the backrest, the armrests, studded with hundreds of sharp spikes. The accused woman, stripped naked to maximize contact with the points, was forcibly strapped into this horrific seat. The spikes, while perhaps not long enough to cause instant fatal wounds, would pierce the flesh all over her body, causing constant agonizing pain. She might be left there for hours, even days, unable to move without intensifying the torment. Sleep was impossible, and every tiny shift brought fresh waves of agony. To add another layer of suffering, the iron chair was sometimes heated from below, turning the spikes into searing points of torture, burning the flesh they pierced. The primary goal wasn't necessarily execution, but confession extraction under such relentless, prolonged torment, enduring both physical pain and psychological despair. Many victims would confess to anything, consorting with the devil, casting spells, attending Sabbaths, just to make the suffering stop, sealing their own fate. Even before the peak of the witch hunts, public humiliation remained a key component of punishing women deemed disruptive, sometimes preceding even harsher methods. 8. The Cucking Stool. While often confused with the Ducking Stool, the Cucking Stool represents an earlier and arguably even more degrading form of public punishment prominent in medieval England. Unlike the Ducking Stool, which involved water, the Cucking Stool was primarily about exposure and ridicule. Sometimes described as a bottomless chair or simply a rough plank seat attached to a pole, its key feature was forcing the woman into an uncomfortable, undignified position. Women accused of being common scolds, disorderly, or involved in prostitution were strapped onto this device. They were then carried or wheeled through the streets, effectively put on display for the entire community. The public was encouraged to mock, insult, and sometimes physically assault the restrained woman, throwing rotten food, mud, or stones. It was a ritual designed to enforce conformity by weaponizing shame. The Cucking Stool served as a stark warning: step out of line, challenge patriarchal authority, or violate sexual norms, and your dignity would be publicly stripped away before the jeering eyes of your neighbors. It was psychological warfare disguised as minor punishment, but the cruelty could escalate far beyond public shame or spiked chairs, reaching levels of barbarity that are hard to comprehend, involving the complete and utter destruction of the body. 9. Sawing. Perhaps one of the most gruesome methods of execution employed throughout history, including in medieval Europe and parts of the ancient world, was death by sawing. And women, particularly those accused of serious transgressions like witchcraft, adultery, or even alleged demonic pregnancy, were sometimes subjected to this horrific fate. The method often involved hanging the victim upside down, usually by the ankles, with their legs spread apart. This inversion served a hideously practical purpose for the executioners. It kept blood flowing to the brain, ensuring the victim remained conscious for as long as possible during the ordeal. Then, typically starting at the groin, two executioners would begin sawing the body vertically in half with a large, coarse saw. The process was agonizingly slow, the saw tearing through flesh, muscle, organs, and bone. The victim would experience unimaginable pain watching and feeling their own body being ripped apart, often remaining conscious until the saw reached vital organs in the upper abdomen or chest. It represents an absolute extreme of brutal punishment designed to inflict maximum suffering and terror. While the witch hunts provide a stark backdrop, it's crucial to remember that the torture of women wasn't solely confined to accusations of witchcraft. Many methods were about broader control. 10. Control and punishment. It's tempting to view these horrific tortures solely through the lens of the witch craze, but that misses a broader, more insidious picture. Devices like the Scorns Bridal and the Cucking Stool weren't primarily about demonic pacts. They were about policing everyday female behavior, specifically speech and perceived public disorderliness. Punishing a scold or a gossip wasn't about fighting Satan, it was about enforcing patriarchal ideals of quiet, submissive womanhood. Similarly, the Spanish donkey and the pair of anguish, while used in witch trials, were also frequently employed against women accused of sexual transgressions like adultery or abortion. This reveals a deep-seated societal obsession with controlling female sexuality and reproduction. These weren't isolated incidents of extreme cruelty, they were systemic tools used across different contexts, religious, legal, and social, to maintain a rigid hierarchy where women's bodies, voices, and actions were constantly under scrutiny and subject to violent correction if they deviated from prescribed norms. The sheer variety of tortures aimed at women underscores how pervasive this need for control was, manifesting in countless brutal ways beyond the specific paranoia of witchcraft accusations. It reflects a history where female autonomy itself was often seen as a threat requiring suppression. For those deemed guilty of the most serious offenses like heresy or witchcraft, often after enduring other tortures, a final, fiery spectacle awaited. 11. Burning at the stake. Burning at the stake stands as one of the most infamous and enduring images of historical persecution, particularly aimed at women accused of witchcraft and heresy throughout Europe, especially from the 15th to 18th centuries. After enduring interrogations likely involving some of the tortures we've discussed, the condemned woman was led to a public place where a large wooden post, the stake, was erected. She was chained or tied securely to it, often atop a pyre of wood and brushwood. Sometimes out of a twisted sense of mercy or to ensure a quicker death before the flames fully took hold, a bag of gunpowder might be hung around her neck, or the executioner might strangle her just as the fire was lit. But often the sentence was carried out in its full horror, being burned alive. The flames would lick upwards, searing flesh, causing unimaginable agony. Suffocation from the thick smoke was often as deadly as the heat itself. These executions were highly public events, drawing large crowds, meant to serve as a terrifying warning to others. It was the ultimate purification ritual in the eyes of the persecutors and a final, agonizing public degradation for the victim. While many tortures were brutal and swift, or designed for prolonged agony over hours or days, one ancient method stands out for its uniquely drawn-out, grotesque, and insect-driven horror. 12. Scafism. Though not exclusively reserved for women, historical accounts, notably from ancient Persia, describe women suffering the horrifying fate of scafism, also known as the boats. This method is stomach-churning in its ingenuity. The victim was placed inside a narrow boat or hollowed-out log, and another identical boat was placed on top, enclosing them completely except for their head, hands, and feet. They were then force-fed large quantities of milk and honey. This mixture served a dual purpose. It provided sustenance to keep the victim alive longer, and it induced severe, uncontrollable diarrhea, filling the enclosure with excrement. The trapped victim, covered in this filth and often smeared with more honey externally, was then left out in the sun, frequently near stagnant water. The combination of feces, honey, and immobility attracted swarms of insects, flies, wasps, beetles, and which would bite, sting, breed, and feed on the victim's flesh, burrowing into orifices and open sores caused by the constant irritation and waste. Death came excruciatingly slowly, potentially taking days or even weeks, resulting from a combination of dehydration, starvation, septic shock from infections, and being literally eaten alive. It represents a particularly gruesome form of prolonged torment.